Yo, coming up on today's Locked On Warriors, the Golden State Warriors have signed their second round draft pick. Finally, Quinten Post to a two-way contract. They waived Daeqwon Plowden to make that happen. We're discussing whether that's a good or bad decision. Plus, with Warriors Media Day on Monday, the storylines are going to start coming out, the subplots to the season. What's the most intriguing on today's Locked On Dubs?
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is the good word, everyone? Thanks for making Locked On Warriors your first listen of every day. Lots of ways you can tune into the show. If you are on the go, make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your audio podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google. We are there for you. We also stream on YouTube, and we're going live after every single game this season, starting with the LA Clippers preseason game on October 5th. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. I'm your host. My name's Charlie Walter, formerly of 95.7 The Game in San Francisco. That's the flagship of the Golden State Warriors. Also covered the team's championship run in 21-22 for CBS News Bay Area. Call letters KPIX. And one of the men that worked with me down on Broadway Street at 95.7 The Game would be Matt Kolsky. He joins me today to talk the Warriors' newest addition. They've had him for a while now, but they technically have not had Quinten Post. They do. What does he bring to the table? Does the addition get Kolsky all fuzzy inside? They waived Daeqwon Plowden to make that happen. Does that make Kolsky the opposite of fuzzy inside? Is he shedding tears over the loss of Daeqwon Plowden, although he is going to camp? And then a big bulk of the show today is the Warriors storylines entering this season. Is the media moguls are going to be out at Chase on Monday. It's media day. It'll give us sound bites for a couple of days that gets us. So we're in hypothetical season right now, Kolsky. We'll then get into storyline season for about 4 days, and then we get to play basketball. So good to see you.
I'm excited for playing basketball. Storyline mode is fun too, though. And to answer the most important question of the day, no, I am not in tears about Daeqwon Plowden having to compete for another two-way slot at camp.
And prove your worth. If he wants a spot on the team, he's got to go out there and prove it. But it's Quinten Post who gets that spot right now. He was the 52nd pick for the Golden State Warriors in this year's draft. They originally traded out of the draft to bring Lindy Waters in. They get that pick back. They use it on Boston College's Quinten Post, who was a double-double machine last year, has really developed nicely in the ACC, was first-team All-ACC defender. I had one of his teammates on, Mason Madsen, at Boston College. Madsen was his point guard and kind of, was trying to pick his brain as much as possible about what Post could potentially bring to the table. And what I got from him was he can shoot, he can shoot, he can shoot. He did say he can bang a little bit in the paint, and he's more physical than most of the, Europeans get credit for, because that's kind of the stereotype soft. He said Post is by no means soft, but just the conditioning and the overall physicality of the game is what he's going to be most curious to see if Quinten can handle. Is he going to have the chance to handle it? Because as I mentioned, he is on a two-way contract right now. They waived Plowden to make some room for him. Plowden will compete at camp. But where do you stand on the Post as of right now, getting a two-way spot instead of a roster spot?
I believe at this point, first of all, I'm not even sure they can fill a roster spot because of
They don't have the finances intact to do it. They would have to give Post more than the $500K that they have available.
That's it. There you have it. They don't have enough to sign a minimum contract right now because they're hard capped after one of the trades that I believe the Clay deal was technically a sign and trade. So, no, not surprised he didn't get a regular roster spot, but I do think let me put it this way. I think there's a sincere investment in Quinten Post. Quinten Post.
Quinton, just say it quick. Quinton
He's
Post.
Dutch. Quinten Post. There's a sincere investment in this guy as a potential piece for the future, because we have already talked about how this year's team, and look, it's not likely to change in the next year or two, could really use a stretch big. And, I mean, most of the stuff you read, whether it's evaluating the pick or evaluating this two-way reshuffling to get him locked down, everything will point out, this is the stretch center they've been looking for type of thing, right? Not to say he's going to be that guy in the NBA, but like that's what they're trying to do here. They have wanted someone to do this. The need is obvious with a 4 in Draymond, who does not stretch the floor and is not a real 3-point shooter. It's obvious how he'd fit if he's good. How often does the 52nd pick in the league in the draft hit? We could check, but it's not going to be a huge success rate. As you said, he can shoot. I mean, he was 50-40-86, practically 50-40-90 in college as a 7-footer. That's nothing to sneeze at. That said, there's plenty of guys who shot the hell out of the ball in college and were never successful pros. So we'll see. We'll see. Some of those guys went even higher than 52nd in the draft. But I have high hopes, might be a stretch, but I have sincere hopes that Quinten Post is a part of the future of the Warriors. I have a hard time believing that he plays a part in this upcoming season.
Yeah, and that's what it sounds like, that he's going down to Santa Cruz to kind of figure it out, work on his chops. Plowden,
that
meanwhile,
being said,
gets
Chuck,
waived.
Hold on.
What's that?
Before we talk Plowden, like if that guy goes down to the G League, because I don't know if I've told you.
I got more Post, Kolsky. We're going back to Post. I just want to read you about Plowden real quick because he averaged the 14.5, the 4 in the California Classic. Looked really good. They bring him in on a 2-way, and they decide to get rid of the athletic wing that can throw down, that can really become a lockdown defender, and that looked good in the summer league at defending. They get rid of him instead of a Pat Spencer or Reese Beekman. I'm sure there are some people that are a little upset about that, but again, we've talked about how this team's strength is numbers, it's depth. You wouldn't imagine 2-way guys are getting much run this season. If anyone does, it's gonna be Quinten Post. But this from Dalton Johnson of NBC. The expectation has always been that Post will be on a 2-way contract. One source calls Post an exciting developmental guy. I really thought that when they drafted him, especially with his age, that they were going to expect him to kind of plug and play. Maybe not plug and be a huge contributor, but plug, give him some size, give him some threes off the bench. And it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case.
Well, you're gonna have to play him ahead of either Trace Jackson Davis or Kevon Looney in order for that to happen, or one of those guys has to get hurt. And I think that's what, not wishing this on anyone, but the fastest path for Quinten Post to find the floor is injury, and that would be unfortunate. I was saying, though, if he goes to the G League and is averaging 20-plus point, averaging a 20-point double-double, shooting 45% from 3, he's going to find his way here to play a few minutes. Like, the prospect of what even, a piece of his sort of college production would look like off the bench for the Warriors is pretty tantalizing.
Very tantalizing. I mean, how many legit 7-footers, not 6'10", not 7 feet, can put it on the deck a little bit. He's not going to be someone that can, create his own shot, but can put it on the deck, get to the rim. If he's got a little bit of a mismatch, pick and pop, pick and roll. So he does add some value there. The question would be, how is his defense going to translate over, because he could guard some of those ACC bigs. But the NBA,
Chuck, he's 7 feet tall. That gives him a pretty good start. And we just spent 2 months
hands up
we just spent 2 months drooling over the prospect of a guy who became an all-star fitting almost all of the descriptions we just used for Quinten Post. Did we not? What
I
is
would
Lauri
say Markkanen
Markkanen
can create
if
his own
not
shot a little bit better. I would say he's at
not
least
as a rookie? No,
yeah, I
I
mean,
believe
he's at
me.
least a
I
known
watched Lauri
commodity
Markkanen.
in terms of defensively. Not a great defender in the NBA by any means, but we have no idea how
Chuck,
Post is going to hold up.
but we're talking about because he's a rookie, we don't know. Of course, now Lauri Markkanen is an all-star, and by no means am I saying Quinten Post is likely to be an all-star. My point is, if he's good, the good version of what we're talking about kind of looks like Lauri Markkanen, right?
Yeah. I mean,
7
the
feet.
Walmart brand. Yeah.
7 feet, shoots
The
the
second round
three.
pick brand. Yeah. No doubt.
That's
Coming up, we're
that's
getting
what you're
into the
hoping.
biggest Warriors storylines. As I mentioned, media days on Monday. That's where we start getting into conversations about, is Kevon Looney in the best shape of his life? Is
I'm
Kevon
sure he
Looney
is.
a great three-point shooter? Is Kuminga in the best shape of his life? Why did Kuminga go with the gold hair? All these stories and more can be answered on Monday. Kolsky and I are talking about some of our favorites heading into this season. Coming up next on Locked On. First, let's tell you about our sponsor, FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you're thinking about placing that live bet, we all love it. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So place a $5 bet on a big time underdog plus 250, whatever it may be, and you get $200 in bonus bets. That's on FanDuel.com. Kolsky, I'm bringing you in over under 50, 43 and a half for the Golden State Warriors. Putting you on the spot, over under. It's as simple as that for the people.
I'm over, but I'm not really convinced.
You're doing it for the sake of the show, and you should too.
No, I'm not. I would take if you made me choose, I would take the over, but I don't plan to invest in that.
Fair enough. Made him choose over, and you can do that on FanDuel.com. All right, so some of the storylines heading into this upcoming season. There's the plot, and then there's the subplots. The plot is the Golden State Warriors trying to get back to the top of the mountain for the first time since 21-22, trying to prove to all the critics out there that are saying this is done. The Warriors are living in the past, trying to roll this thing back out there. They got a co-host on Locked On Warriors talking about the death lineup the prior day and how the Warriors are going to have their own little Walmart brand version this season. But there's always the subplots. What goes on in between the lines this season? Starting with Life Without Clay. Yeah, starting with Life Without Clay. That's a huge one heading into this upcoming season. How are the Warriors going to look without Klay Thompson for the first time since Kolsky didn't have children? Let's put it that way. Probably didn't have the beard as well. A long time ago. Long time ago. Podziemski's numbers didn't lie. That's going to be a storyline. Every model that is out there says that Brandon Podziemski is one of the best players on this team, that he makes the team better, that any lineup that he is a part of succeeds because he is in there. So we're going to find out whether Podziemski's numbers were indeed as good as they look on paper. And we're going to see it through his production on the floor. Number 3, Jonathan Kuminga. Is he a part of the future? And then just the underdog mentality, as everyone has written this team off. Can they get back there? You know that if they do get to the playoffs, that's going to be a major talking point, that everyone wrote the Golden State Warriors off, and Steph Curry once again is here to prove the doubters wrong. But subplot-wise, what are you most looking forward to this season?
It's Kuminga for me, and it's not even close. And I'll continue to say it until the cows come home. the future of this franchise is about Jonathan Kuminga right now. And that doesn't even necessarily mean he is the future of the franchise. It just means that's what it turns on as far as I can tell. Because if that guy's great, whether it's as a Warrior or not, that's going to be a huge story for the next decade of Warriors basketball. If that guy, doesn't turn into anything, that's going to be a huge story for the Warriors franchise for the next 5 to 7 years. I just think it's so important. And I just hope he's given the right opportunities to thrive. And it doesn't mean you bend over backwards to satisfy a guy. It doesn't mean you're changing what the team or the franchise as a whole wants to do because of a guy, but he's got to be on the floor and he's got to be allowed to grow a little bit into this team and his game, because that's what the future is. It's either him doing that and becoming the piece of a major trade, or it's him doing that and becoming the guy that extends Steph Curry's already ridiculous prime by another couple years. I really believe he's that good. I'd like to see it for 35 minutes a night for a month and see how it goes.
I had a feeling you were going to say that, and that leads me into Steve Kerr going on the TK show with Tim Kawakami and talking about Jonathan Kuminga extensively. Quote, I think JK, if you look at his 3 years here, I think it would look like the stock market over 10 years, Kerr said to Kawakami. There have been some dips for sure, moments where I sat him, didn't play him, and took him out of the rotation. But from when he walked in 3 years ago until now, he's dramatically better. He's at about a 15% ROI over those 3 years. He didn't say that, I'm assuming. And that's how it's supposed to go. Success and improvement are never linear at this level, but especially for someone with so little experience. Kerr went on to explain that Kuminga is still incredibly young. He's 21 years of old, and would barely have started his professional basketball career in a previous era. In fact, if he was in the COVID league, hell, Quinten Post is 24. He was in college last season. So he may have been there for a minute now. If this were 20, 30 years ago, he would have just finished his fourth year of college or his rookie year in the NBA, Kerr told Kawakami. When you throw all that stuff in, I love where he's at right now. He's gotten so much better, still has so much room for growth, which is the exciting part. He loves it here. He's excited about it. He has told me that. Anything from this article, from this interview that you read or saw, catch your eye?
I wouldn't. No, nothing. There's just Steve Kerr, who I think is one of the best, not just head coaches, but people in all of sports, and also one of the best head coaches in all of sports. But there are certain things he's not willing to do. One is
give you anything?
Well, coddle people in any sort of way. Like he chooses. Steve Kerr knows exactly what he's saying. And maybe it's the Phil Jackson in him. But while he went out of his way to make sure he was saying nice things about Jonathan Kuminga, he also made damn sure that he said, like, Jonathan Kuminga's still got to work his ass off to play for my team, And it's true. And maybe he's doing it right. He's probably doing it right, and I'm the jackass here, right? That's the most Occam's razor. That is the most likely scenario. But I don't know. If it was me, and maybe I'm coddling Gen Z, but I think I would have been like, man, did you see how good he was when I finally let him on the floor last year? I'm not going to make that mistake again. That's the attitude I would have, especially publicly. Even if in private, I was like, listen, pal, I know you think you're hot stuff now, but you still got to run up and down the floor and not miss a defensive rotation if you want to stay out there.
Yeah.
I guess I respect that he's not going to change. I do.
He is who he is.
And it's worked.
Lineup combinations, man. That's what we're talking about when Locked On Warriors continues, because in this TK interview, Steve Kerr had some good stuff on the lineups. How Jonathan Kuminga is to be utilized. Can he play the 3 this upcoming season? That's next on Locked On Dubs. All right, one of my favorite apps out there is the Gametime app. And the reason it's so nice is because everything is in one place, condensed, and it makes buying tickets very easy. You scroll onto the app, and the first thing that you see, seat views, panoramic views from your seat in the app before you buy. Also, you know that you're getting the lowest price out there because it has the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will cover you not just 100% of the difference. You'd be making money if they can't save you some money. 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And remember, with Gametime, the closer you get to your event, the cheaper the tickets are. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Talking about the Golden State Warriors lineup combinations this upcoming season. It was the big emphasis of our show yesterday because Steve Kerr has mentioned it this offseason. He's never had a roster with so much competition top to bottom. Now, is he a prisoner of the moment saying that, or do you truly believe that, Kolsky?
We looked at that, what was it, 14-15, that first title lineup the other day, and it's pretty deep. It's close, but this is there's a ton of competition. I mean, it's definitely in the argument, and if he says it, I'll believe him.
So Kawakami asked Kerr in the interview about the possibility of Kuminga playing the 3 as the small forward this season, and Kerr basically said it's all based on the rotation combinations that he rolls out. Makes sense, right? He said, you get back to lineup combinations, he's definitely a small forward if we've got a shooting 5 on the floor. So think, if that's Kevon Looney, if that's the description for what Looney brings to the table this year, a shooting 5, because who else is your shooting 5? Quinten Post? That's the other name you bring up. Maybe he plays on the floor with Kuminga. But aside from that, it's not Draymond. It's not Trace Jackson Davis. So that's when he's the small forward, because he's got all the skill stuff you want out of a 3, attacking the rim and spreading the floor. So he said, if we're playing Trace Jackson Davis and Draymond Green, I'm going to have a hard time playing JK at the 3. But that's kind of what I'm talking about with camp. Let's see what happens with Kyle Anderson. Let's see what happens with the healthy Gary Payton. Hopefully there are more combinations that we can play this year where JK does play the 3, shoots it well enough to quickly force defenses to come out at him. But those are all areas that will unfold during camp, and we'll see where we stand heading into the season. He mentions Trace and Draymond playing together. That was a lineup that worked a lot last year. Do you envision any scenario where Kyle Anderson and Draymond Green can play on the floor together, or is that just a ridiculous notion to even think about with their offensive limitations? You'd have to put Buddy and Steph on the floor at the same time, right? If you had those two.
You would. I guess my question with a lineup like that is, if you're playing Anderson, why not just play Kuminga? We keep circling back to this. It's why Quinton Post just got signed. It's why we're floating the idea that Kevon Looney might learn to shoot 3s, or perhaps Kyle Anderson will somehow rediscover that ability. But like, there is not a path to a high, a high 3-point percentage shooting 4 or 5 on this team that isn't kind of a long shot. The best chances are probably Kuminga hitting 3s and playing the 4, or Looney? Well, I mean, who's of those bigs? It's not going to be Trace. I would love to think Draymond would have another year where he hits threes, but I don't see that as particularly likely. Like, at least Looney usually does what he says he's going to do. I don't know, but none of these
Mr. Reliable.
guys. He is. So the fact that he said he's going to do it makes me think, hell, maybe he is. But it's not obvious. That is why. I mean, look, if I can be honest, the number one thing I keep thinking when I hear quotes like that is I just can't believe that they wouldn't have offered Brandon Bajemski for Lauri Markkanen because he solves all these problems, right? That's the guy. Lauri Markkanen's the guy that solves all these problems. Now, maybe he was never available, whatever. I'm just saying they could use that. They could use somebody who's big that can stretch the floor that would therefore allow you to play Kuminga at the three. That being said, I don't think Kuminga becoming a 36, 38% three-point shooter is so crazy. He's improved as a jump shooter in general since he arrived. He's clearly gotten more comfortable as a shooter and scorer within what the Warriors want to do. I really am expecting big things from him, and I just think he's going to force Steve Kerr to play him. And if you want to play him and you still want to play Draymond at the 4, you got to play him at the 3. Like, I don't know that there's going to be better choices.
Does that quote, though, talking about how he wants him to play the 3 and how they've had their differences in the past, they've worked through them, but there's definitely been public frustrations from both sides directed at each other. Does it kind of make you think hearing that he's a small forward if they have a shooting 5 on the floor? But if it's Trace, if it's Draymond, if it's Kyle Anderson, some of these other players that can slide into that big slot. And if Looney can't shoot, does it make you think that maybe Kuminga isn't part of the future? Or does the comments from Draymond, don't trade this guy, comments from Dunleavy and Lacob that they believe he's going to be a star, and Steph's positive remarks on him, like, who do you believe here when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga? How high are they on Kuminga? I guess the fact that he's here still at this point would go to show that they still believe in him quite a bit.
I would say that. I think you could believe most of what Steve Kerr says. Now, I don't think he always says everything, but when he says stuff like that, I take him more or less. I don't want to say at face value, because I think part of this is certainly trying to light a fire under Kuminga's ass. Like, that's part of the game here that Steve Kerr is playing. He knows what's going to get aggregated from that sort of interview, right? Steve Kerr's not going to be shocked when he sees a headline on whatever blog that says, like, Kerr says Kuminga needs to shoot better to play the 3. Like, that's what people are going to pull from this, and Jonathan Kuminga is going to see it, and he knows that. So I think that's all sort of baked in here, and I think really that's the goal. The goal is he can be on the floor with a non-shooting 5 because he's a shooting 3. He's not going to be Paul George, he's not going to be a pure shooter, but if he can hit 36, 37%, because what Kerr's talking about is this. As it stands right now, today, when the season starts, Jonathan Kuminga is going to be by himself, more or less, when he's standing beyond the arc. Nobody's guarding him out there. They're trying to avoid him dunking all over them, right? That's the goal with Jonathan Kuminga. Don't let him dunk on your ass. So until he makes a high percentage, and even once he makes a high percentage, then like it's going to take a month before people really start coming out there to guard him. And either what's going to happen is he's going to hit 28% of them and they're never coming out there and it's not worth shooting, or he's going to hit 36, 37% of them. And how long it takes people to come out, we'll see, but those are all made 3-pointers that count for the team in the meantime, and that's going to keep him on the floor.
One question I have for you, last one I have for you, is if you had a media credential for this media day on Monday, and you had the chance to ask anyone a question, any question. You got the mic once. Warriors PR, they pointed out once, said, Kolsky, here you go. You get to choose, though, in this hypothetical scenario, who you're talking to. Who would you ask, and what would you ask him?
I mean, that's so hard. I think I would ask Draymond Green from a personal standpoint. We know you want to win a title. I understand you want to win a title. That's the goal. Great. I support you. From a personal standpoint, what's a successful season for Draymond Green, the individual? I would like to know what Draymond thinks he has to do. I want to know what Draymond thinks Draymond's job is. Does that make sense?
To be the leader, right? In the last 2 seasons, he's been anything but. I mean, when he's on the floor.
Is that what he thinks? It's something that I listen to every episode of Draymond's podcast, and I don't know that he certainly thinks of himself as a leader. And I think he has largely been not just a leader, but one of the great leaders over the course of his career for this team. But as you say, the last couple of years have gone awry, very specifically in that sense. But also, what does Draymond think he has to do as a player? Does he think he needs to be Defensive Player of the Year? Can he be Defensive Player of the Year still? I don't know. I guess if I had one question, I love asking about watching Draymond Green, and I think that's what it would be.
Good stuff. All right, media day on Monday. I'll probably see you before then, Kolsky. We'll do another one of these here this week. But Locked on Dubs, good stuff, Matt. Free and available, always, never behind a paywall, wherever you get your audio podcasts, and always streaming on YouTube. Have a great night, everyone.